coming to Australia was probably one of the best things I ever did, because of the diversity of the city and all the different cuisines and just the stuff you can eat on your days off, and the people I've met, and just the Australian culture itself has been really probably the best move I've ever made. And I think Australia is probably cooking some of the best food in the world right now.
This is The Crackling. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stepping out of the shadows can be daunting, but it can shine a new light on the value in each and every one of us. After a decade working with one of Australia's most influential chefs, Andrew McConnell, JP Twomey decided the time was right to go in search of his own identity, his own style of cookery. As he discovered, the incredible foundation built over the last decade not only gave him the confidence to step out of his comfort zone, but deliver Melbourne one of its very best restaurants too. So JP, you landed in Australia on New Year's Eve in 2000 as a 19-year-old. What brought you here?
What brought me here? I've got my friend was coming, and his partner was Australian. I've got two uncles in Melbourne and lots of cousins, so I was always going to come here. But I think when my friend said he was coming with his girlfriend, we both bought one-way tickets, and I haven't looked back since I've come.
Well, you did start your career as a chef for a couple of years back in Ireland. Can you tell us about that period of time? And was Australia a big shock to you when you arrived from a career sense?
I started, my uncle has a restaurant in Dingle in County Kerry. So I just, I wasn't doing well at school. I just hated school. I needed something else to do. So I started working with my uncle in summer holidays, and from the age of 14. Scrubbing mussels, scrubbing oysters. He had a seafood restaurant, doing some dishes. And I think from 14 to 16, I spent all my holidays there just doing all the pots and pans and scrubbing mussels and oysters and stuff. And when I turned 16, I was eligible to enroll in a apprenticeship in Ireland. So I enrolled in that. It was like it was in a hotel. It was a 2-year course. It was live-in, so it was like 6 months living on campus, and then 6 months doing work placement. So in the hotel, you would do all your training. We did front of house training and back of house training. Monday to Friday, every weekend I go to my uncle's restaurant and work. You were living in the hotel. It started at 9 o'clock in the morning, and you'd finish at, I think, 4. And then you had 2 hours every night from, I think, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. You were allowed to go to the pub and just get wasted and come back to the hotel, go to sleep, and and just get up. I think it was like Groundhog Day every day, the same thing. Everyone went out and got pissed for 2 hours and came back. And then after I did my training, I worked in some hotels in Ireland. And then, when I was 19, I met my friend at one of those hotels, and we decided to come to Australia. And I think the question that you asked about, Australia was a huge shock. I think just the different ingredients and all the different foods you don't get in Ireland. So when I came to Australia first, I worked with Paul Wilson at Radii at the Park Hyatt, which was like, I think, when Paul, he just won Chef of the Year. He had, I think it might have been 4 hats back then when it was 4 or 5 hats. Now it's only 3 hats. But so I applied for a job. I applied for lots of jobs when I came to Melbourne first, and I didn't work for the first 3 or 4 months. And I think I found it hard to find a job at the beginning. I had lots of interviews, but lots of the places I went to just didn't really, I didn't really feel it. And then I got a phone call from the Park Hyatt, from Sean Donovan, who was the sous chef at the time with Paul Wilson. And I went there, and I loved it straight away. I clicked with Sean, clicked with all the guys, did my trial. They rang me back, and I got the job. And that was an amazing place to work. It was, I think, sat 150 people. It was a big restaurant, big huge kitchen, lots of chefs, and I think working in that kitchen, I think Paul was a really interesting chef back then. I think he kind of touched on every cuisine when he was working at Radii. It was like Italian, Chinese, a little bit of Japanese, a little bit of Thai, a bit of Vietnamese. He's kind of covered everything. And Paul's known for his like big, bold flavors. So I got to see lots of different ingredients there, like you'd never get to see in Ireland. Lots of Asian ingredients, like lots of like really nice soy sauces, spices like ginger, lots of different chilies, all the different herbs.
Was there any dishes from that time that you still remember?
Yeah, there was one dish that was sent me down very, very hard. It was a tuna sashimi. It was one of his signature, just a tuna sashimi with a wasabi panna cotta. It's just the way it was plated was like, it was very fiddly and it took like ages to do. It was like sliced sashimi, wasabi panna cotta out of a Dario mold. And then there was spring onions marinated in soy sauce, some freshly shaved daikon, some fresh spring onions. And it was all kind of layered up around the outside of the panna cotta. So it just took like 4 or 5 minutes to plate each one. And I just remember the first time I did them, it was just hell. It was like one of the worst nights of my life. And in a 150-seater restaurant, so you can imagine you sell 30 or 40 of those a night during service. Like lots of prep and for service as well. It was like, yeah, pretty scary.
You had an extraordinary start with a chef that's been one of the most influential in Melbourne's culinary history, Paul Wilson, and you followed him to the Botanical, which became a very renowned restaurant. What was that period of time like?
Yeah, so I went from Radii to the Botanical with Paul and Chris Lucas when they opened Botanical. Botanical was well, I've never opened a restaurant before, and Botanical was 7 days a week, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and you're doing like 150 for lunch, to 180 for dinner, like every day, for like the 2 years that I was there. So it was quite an experience. It was very, very busy. And I've never worked in a restaurant that style, like breakfast, lunch, and dinner before. I think from when we opened the 2 years I was there, I think there was only 2 chefs left in the kitchen that had actually started. Everyone else had like finished, had left. I think we went through, it was so busy, we went through maybe 40 chefs in 6 months or something. It was just so intense and so busy. I think it was even for Paul, I think it was a big change as well. I think with a restaurant like that, you start out with all these ideas of how you want stuff done, but I think eventually you kind of have to you got to work a bit smarter, not harder. I think lots of, like, we were going through maybe 25-30 kilos of calamari each day, and I think we were getting that in at the beginning, and like people were cleaning it from start to finish. But I think Paul worked out a deal with the fishermen where we could get it in cleaned and get the fishermen to clean it instead of us doing it. So yeah, everything, it was just like each job had like a lot of components to it. So it was just big and busy.
What sort of impact did a chef like Paul Wilson have on your career in those early years?
Oh, a massive impact. I think Paul was, I don't think he spoke to me for the first 3 months at Radii, but I think that was just the old school way. Once he seen I put my head down and got the work done, he kind of warmed to me, and I earned his respect. And after that, I think the amount of stuff I learned off Paul, as I said, like ingredients I've never used before, and he always took the time as well to like educate you, which was really, really good. And Paul was always like, he was one of these guys that always had like 5 or 6 specials on all the time. He never let up, and you get handed the specials at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon when you're already in the shit. But I think, yeah, he really had a strong connection to producers as well, Paul, which I really hadn't seen before, which is really good. And I think the big thing for me with Paul was the first time getting introduced to like all the Asian techniques and stuff I'd never ever seen before, which was a real eye opener for me. And also he using a wood oven as well at the Botanical was really, really interesting. We had a wood oven at Radii as well. We did a lot of cooking from the wood oven, which is good, something I'd never seen before. And just the different techniques, like cooking meat, lots of classical dishes as well. He was very classical, lots of his preparations, which is really good. And I suppose seeing someone manage a kitchen 7 days a week, breakfast, lunch, and dinner as well, is quite inspiring. Of that volume, you know what I mean? You probably hated it at the time when you're working there, but you look back on it now, and I learned a lot of things from back then.
You've become a real fixture in the Melbourne culinary scene, and you've worked with some incredible people, not just Paul Wilson, but you spent over a decade with Andrew McConnell in various establishments. What's it like working with Andrew? He's such an influence on that city.
Oh, Andrew's great. Andrew's like, I think Andrew has something that not a lot of chefs have in Australia. I think he's got that sense of style that he brings to the restaurant as well as the kitchen. Like most of Andrew's restaurants are, he designs them as well. Like he's got that eye to detail on like the finishing touches on the table. He's got an eye for design. I just don't think a lot of other chef owners have. I think a lot of chef owners are, the majority of them are probably focused on the kitchen, where Andrew's more, he's over kind of everything. And I think he's just like, he's just got an eye for detail. He's into lots of art and, you know what I mean, all this stuff like that. So it's really good.
You worked with him across many venues, but you ended up becoming the development chef. What does that actually involve?
Well, the development chef, the role I had was spending, when I started out, I was spending a week at each venue. Kind of like a set of fresh eyes, really, just going into each business, having a look and seeing what could be fixed, see what was good, see what was wrong, front of house, and having a look at some front of house stuff as well, and then just implementing some better systems so the kitchen was flowing better, helping the head chefs, looking at some costings and rostering and just seeing how we can make it flow better. And then it started off with a week by week, and then if we ever opened a restaurant, I might be based at, say, Supernormal or something like that for 6 months just to get it up and running and help develop the younger chefs and help train with the younger chefs, because the head chef was usually tied up with doing the pass and all the other stuff, and then I could just float around and keep an eye on all the stock levels and how everything was being prepared and make sure everything was kind of done properly. And I think it was just basically just another pair of eyes for Andrew in the business, because Andrew was in between each business as well. I think he trusted me to make decisions as well on his behalf, which was good, because I'd been with him for so long. And I was mainly in charge of the creative side, like creating dishes and helping with menus and stuff, and then giving the chefs some help with the management side as well if they needed it.
What was it like being in that role? You were used to being on the pans and running a kitchen day to day, and then you're sort of moving from venue to venue. What were the challenges involved in that?
Well, I think it was really good, because I had been a cutler for maybe 2.5, 3 years as the head chef, which is really grueling and challenging. And I think I kind of grew tired of the fine dining aspect, just the degustation and stuff. So I think when Andrew offered me that position, it was at the perfect time, and I really enjoyed it. I think it was exciting to see all the different kitchens and get away from like cooking cutler style of food, maybe to go into Cumulus, where it's a bit more sharing style menu. It's not as like individually plated. And again, going to Cumulus as well, you're working. It's a 7-day a week breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So you're covering all aspects again. So you're doing some breakfast dishes. They also had sandwiches and stuff. So there's a lot of stuff to learn there. And then you go to Supernormal, which is different again. You're learning Asian techniques and ingredients. I think that was one of the good things with Andrew's restaurant. Each restaurant was quite different, so it wasn't the same everywhere you went, which is really good. The Biddler's Arms is like bistro pub food. Challenges were, I think maybe getting a grasp of breakfast at Cumulus is quite hard. It was a busy service, and I think consistency like anywhere is hard. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing I focused on. And there's always, when you go a week at one restaurant, then you're away for 4 weeks and you come back and you're back at that restaurant again, I think just little things that, you know, kind of piss you off, but you kind of put things in place to make sure they don't happen again. But overall, it was more positives and negatives, really.
When a chef has so many venues like that, how influential is someone like you on the menu? Is there your ID on the menu as well in the McConnell establishments when you were there?
Yeah, for sure. Andrew was really good like that, and I think he still is. Even when I worked I think when I joined him at Circa, I think the first 2 months I was there, he just gave me a pigeon dish, and he was here to make a special out of this tonight. Like he placed that trust in his chefs, which is really good. And I think I've always been the part that's really excited me about cooking is the creative side. I've always been really, really creative. The management side I've gotten better at, but being creative was what I really was happy with. And I think Andrew had a lot of trust in me, and over the years when I worked with him, and definitely at the end I had a lot of say on the menu and stuff. It's super normal and some stuff with cumulus as well. And I think, yeah, because Andrew was busy doing other things, he needed someone in the business that could he could trust, that could make those decisions with menu changes and stuff when he wasn't there.
How have you seen food change during that time, working with Paul Wilson and working with Andrew McConnell over so many years? How would you explain the sort of food culture and what you guys were doing, I guess, towards the end of your time with the McConnell Group?
Well, I think going from I said Paul was like Paul's flavors are like big and bold, and lots of classical European dishes, like lots of French sauces and stuff. And then when I moved to Circa with Andrew, I seen Andrew was a bit more. I think Andrew maybe had a little bit of better understanding of the balancing Asian ingredients, because he'd worked in Shanghai for a little bit, and he'd lots of places he'd trained before had used lots of those ingredients. I think Andrew had like a lighter focus on his dishes, but I think Paul is always, like, looking at Paul the way he's worked through his career. I think he's always kept that motto where he uses lots of, like, he went through the Mexican phase, and I think he always uses lots of different cuisines in his cooking, which is really, really good. And I think Andrew's cooking has always been light and delicate, which is, he's got his own style. But I think from, like, we're cooking from when I started to where I am now, I think cooking has got a lot lighter. It's not as heavy anymore from when I started in Melbourne first. I think it's a little bit more organic and stuff. I think a lot of chefs are really into produce at the moment, like supporting local farmers, especially lots of vegetables and stuff. I think when I was at 312, when I was with Andrew, I think we had Andrew Wood was probably one of the only farmers that supplied vegetables direct to the restaurant. And I think now there's maybe 5 or 6, which is a big leap, and which is really good, because I think where we are now, it's very, very important for the restaurant, like supporting our locals and getting vegetables and stuff direct from the farmers.
You ended up leaving the group, and you're now at Carlton Wine Room. What led to that change?
Well, I think I'd been with Andrew across various restaurants for about 10, maybe 11, 12 years all up. And I think I probably just achieved everything I could have achieved with Andrew. And I just wanted to see if I could do it for myself. I think I said that on Andrew, it was very emotional when I handed in my resignation, because I probably wasn't sure what I was going to do next, but I think I had to do it. And then I probably took 2 or 3 months off after I've left Andrew. Took a job at Gilson briefly just to help out, and then Travis and Andy purchased the Carlton Wine Room, and Andy, I'd worked with Andy since 312, so I probably worked with Andy for 10 years as well across the McConnell Group, and we've always talked about maybe doing something together, or doing a restaurant. And then I think Andy had a coffee with Andy. Andy told me what he was doing, and I said, yeah, I'd be interested in doing it. And I think it just went from there. And then it's I think Carlton Wine Room's been open 2 years now, maybe 2.5 years, maybe February 2018. And yeah, it's just it just clicked as soon as we opened, which is really good. It's like we got there's 2 owners on the floor, which is really good. And I kind of run the kitchen for the guys. Travis does the dining room and the wine list, and Andy does the accounts and does the downstairs bar area. And I think we just clicked. We've got a really good front of house, really good kitchen crew, and it's been kicking along since we've opened, which is really good.
What was it like when you first stepped in the kitchen there? You're used to creating dishes within the McConnell Group, but this time it was your own identity fully. What was it like?
Well, yeah, I think it's really hard when you've worked with someone for Andrew for 10 years. You don't really want to. You want to kind of step away from what you were doing with Andrew, because you don't want people. You're worried like people will think your food is a lot like what you're doing with Andrew's, and you want to kind of make your own identity. So I think it was always hard at the beginning. Like lots of dishes, you have an idea for a dish, and then you you try and it doesn't really work. And I think slowly, when we opened first, we didn't want to spend a lot of money. I think it was because we took over an existing restaurant and lots of the things were in place already. So we kept the menu quite simple. And I think that time at Gilson, when I had been at Gilson, I kind of had time to work on some of my own kind of techniques and my own ideas, which probably helped me between the Andrew and the Carlton Wine Room, which was good. But I think, if I didn't have that time between the Carlton Wine Room and Andrew, dishes might have been a lot similar to what we were doing at the McConnell Group, maybe some of the techniques and dishes. It's always a challenge. You mean to kind of separate yourself from where you've been working for so long, because Andrew's so established in Melbourne and everyone's kind of eating his food and knows what his food is like. You know what I mean?
Well, let's talk about your food. Could you give us your spin on what your cuisine is, and then maybe some dishes to sort of exemplify what that is?
Well, I think the Carlton Wine Room was a modern Australian bistro, really. We take influences from the city we live in, really. We've got some examples of dishes. We've got a cauliflower salad, which is kind of Middle Eastern. It's got some sesame dressing on there and some sumac and stuff. And we just try to keep, if we do take in inspiration from other cuisines, we just try to keep it so it works with the other dishes on the dish. Nothing is like overpowering any other dishes. We have a lot of pork on the menu. One of our signatures is we do a duck and pork croquette with gentleman's relish, which is a perfect like this snack food. It's some beautiful pork shoulders, some Western Plains pork, some duck legs that they both get confit in the oven overnight. We just cover them with tinfoil on a tray, and just cook them slowly in the oven. No oil or anything. We just let them braise gently, and the juices release. And then we just shred the pork shoulder, shred the duck legs, chop up all the fat, put any juice that's come out of each of the meats, and pour them back into the mix. Lots of Dijon mustard, mix it up, season it, a little bit of quarter spice, and then we just set it on trays, and then we cut it into little rectangles, flour, egg, and breadcrumb doughs, deep fry them, and then just a gentleman's relish on top, which is like a prune relish, a little bit of anchovy in it. So they're really popular from day one. They'll probably never come off the menu. And a good wine snack. I think what we try to do with the Carlton Wine Room as well is we kind of focus on the wine first, and then we match the food afterwards, so the food doesn't really interfere with the wine too much. That was the Andy and Travis's focus, which is really good. So we use a little bit of chili, but we don't use a lot of chili. And we try to have a lot of snacks on the menu. So if you come in for a glass of wine, you just have a few snacks here and there as well. We've always got a beautiful pork chop on, Western Plains pork chop. We change the garnish seasonally, but probably the best garnish we do is that we do so with the pork, to eat the pork chops from Judy, we get the pork racks from Judy, hang them in the fridge for a week to dry them out, and then we take the bones out, leave the line and strap the belly in. We just take out that the rack bone, cut them into 250 gram chops. We take the skin off. The skin we put in the croquette mix, and we chop up through the croquette mix, and we make that. And then for the chops, we just season the chops with just a salt and pepper mix, grill it over the hibachi for service. And then we finish it with lots of fennel pollen when it comes off when we've sliced it and it's ready to serve. It's a really popular thing they do in Tuscany. The fennel pollen is really delicious with the pork chop. Gives that nice aniseed flavor. And then we serve it with we make like a mala style sauce. Mala sauce is a Szechuan sauce. We used to make it super normal, but I've tweaked it a little bit to make the ingredients we don't use Szechuan pepper. We use lots of black pepper instead of Szechuan pepper. We still use a little bit of chili in there, but not a lot of chili. It's got soy sauce, red wine vinegar, sugar, some fried shallots, and lots of garlic. So it's like a sweet and sour sauce almost. Then we mix that with some beautiful chickpeas and some fresh cucumbers. So it's like a salad. So it's like a crunchy sweet and sour salad. Put the pork chop on top, lots of fennel pollen, and it's just like the pork chop with the sweet and sour dressing. It just helps cut through the richness of the pork, and it's beautiful. The pork chop is from Judy's I think it's the best pork I've used. It just the fat just melts in your mouth, and it's just consistent, and yeah, it's a winner. Everyone loves it.
You mentioned that when the pork comes in, you hang it for a week. What's the purpose of doing that, and is there a specific temperature that needs to be at?
No, we just hang it in our normal cool room. We don't have a dry aging room, cool room. Well, the pork comes in the vat bag, so we just take it out. It's basically if we can give it a longer than a week and a half, we can. We try to, but it just depends on how many we're selling. It's basically just to dry the pork out and dry the skin. So when we go to bone the pork out, it's a little bit easier for us. And then when we portion into the chops, the skin is nice and dry, so the skin comes off. If the skin is like really wet and fresh, it's really hard to get the skin perfectly off. It's like when you filleting a piece of fish, you want to get the skin off and leave all the fat on the pork, so it's like perfectly skinned. That's one of the reasons, and it just dries it out. Maybe gives it a touch more flavor as well for us.
You've got many challenges in creating your menu, and you often start, as you mentioned, with the wine first, and then the sort of food that goes with that. Can you tell us about how you create dishes? Does it start with a producer, or tell us about the sort of method that you have there?
Yeah, well, we've got our standard producers that we use. So we might have we use the pork from Western Plains. We get some beautiful Sherwagoo from Sherwagoo. They're always staples of the menu. So we work with the producer, and then I think especially with the proteins, and then we'll have our proteins like pork and beef is always on. We always have a half roast chicken on whenever we can get it, and then we just design the dishes around the producers, and lots of our producers as well are farmers, so they got lots of beautiful seasonal vegetables that we match with all our proteins and stuff. And then we have a lot of dishes on the menu that are probably signatures that we can't really change. We have like the croquettes, we got the anchovy on the fried bread, we've got the focaccia with the potato focaccia with stracciatella, which is probably our biggest seller. Rumbaba, which won't come off either, and then we've probably got 12 things in total on the savoury side of the menu, and there's probably like maybe 6 of those that are signatures, and then everything else is kind of seasonal garnishes really, and we just try to change the menu depending on what the producers have coming in, really. And that's we try to keep half roast chicken, pork chop, we do a whole fish, and we do the steak for mains, and we do a pasta dish as well. It stays the same as well.
You've been running your own kitchen now for 2 years. What's been some of the challenges? Has there been a few hiccups along the way? And what do you like to do to get the best out of your team?
Well, yeah, I think the Carlton Wine Room it's. Well, I'll give you a bit of the Carlton Wine. We seat about 150 at the Carlton Wine Room. It's quite deceiving from the outside. You probably wouldn't think we seat that many people, but I think we've got 3 function rooms that all seat. So 3 function rooms that seat 20 people each. So that's 60 covers in the function rooms. So I think on a busy night when it's like heaving, or on a Saturday, you could have 3 functions for lunch and 3 functions for dinner. So it's you're going through a lot of food, a lot of produce, and I think it's just and you're open from Sunday. You open from 12 straight through, so you're open in the afternoon as well. So some days on a Saturday, you could be busy from 12 to 11 straight through. In the afternoon, there's not much time to prep, and you've got 6 functions on. I think that's a big challenge, is just being on top of the prep and having all the systems in place to make sure you're on top of the prep. When we're writing the function menus, we try to keep them similar-ish to some of the stuff that's on the menu, so we're not doubling up on prep. I think that's one of the big challenges there. And we've got a chef solely that just covers the functions, and then with functions you've got dietaries as well. So you need to. That's a big thing with the functions, is when we write the function menus, we really try to make them as dietary friendly as possible without affecting the actual end result of the dish, making sure it's still nice, beautiful and tasty. Rostering is always a hard one when you're doing 7 days a week. People are ringing in sick, trying to keep. I think the big thing for us is making sure everyone is happy. I think we're trying to get everyone working 38 to 40 hours. No one does doubles anymore. Everyone does lunches or dinners. and I think that's a big motto from the owners as well, Andy and Travis. I think is like keeping all the staff happy, being respectful, and just being nice to one another. Really, I think that flows down from the top really well. Everyone gets on really well. I think that's really important.
You've built an amazing career as a really influential chef, but what makes a great chef? Is it something that anyone can do, or are there certain traits?
Well, I think anybody can be a really good cook, but I think taking the next step from cooking to managing a kitchen is a really big step. Look, I've made a lot of mistakes along the way. I look back on some of the things I did when I was probably running kitchens, and I do a lot differently now. I think when I was young and maybe a little bit angrier and stuff. But I think there's a lot more responsibility when stepping up from a cook to running a kitchen. You've got all the costs to worry about, rosters, staff ringing in sick, consistency of everything, really making sure all the systems are running. And I think, yeah, it's a lot more responsibility, and it takes up a lot of your time, and it cuts into your family time as well. So that's something you kind of got to kind of give up a little bit as well. But I think what I've learned over the years is just being more respectful to people. I think maybe when I was a cutler, I was just a little. It was different back then. I think it was long hours. Everyone was doing doubles, lots of pressure. But I think all the mistakes I might have made back then, I try to rectify now. Just be nice to your staff, give time to listen to them, and put a lot of time into training with the young people as well. And you do see the results, which is really important. And I think just having time for your staff, and just remembering that everybody used to be not very good once. You know what I mean? We were all crap when we started out. So just like using that, and just maybe not snapping at people as much, and biting your tongue before you actually speak, and getting angry at someone. You know what I mean? And explaining to them why it's wrong instead of bollocking them and getting angry. I think that's a big thing.
What do you love about the industry, and where is your sort of happy medium as a chef?
Well, I love the industry. I'm 100% committed. I always have been. I don't think I could do anything else if I stopped cooking. It's what I love doing. And I think over the years, I think the best thing about the industry now is just the openness between restaurants, like sharing recipes. There's a little bit of rivalry, but there's not. I think everyone's like more friendly now. People are willing to share. I think back in the day, everyone was a lot secretive. Oh, you can't have the recipe; they're going to copy you, blah blah. But I think that doesn't really matter anymore. I think it's if you have an ingredient in it, it's what you do with it. You know what I mean? As long as you're doing it properly. And I think the people you meet in the industry is really good. I think most of my friends are from the industry, back of house and front of house. I think Melbourne has a very vibrant food scene. I think there's lots to see on your days off, food wise, and there's lots to eat. Yeah, I think it's I'm just trying to think. Sorry. Yeah, it's just I just love doing it. It's just one of those. I wouldn't do anything else.
When you look back on your career, what's been the real highlights for you, and the pivotal changes that created you as a chef?
Well, the big highlight, I think, for me was I was always either going to go to London or going to come to Australia. And I think coming to Australia was probably one of the best things I ever did. I think I probably would not have learned as much as I would have in London as I've learned in Australia, because of the diversity of the city and all the different cuisines and just the stuff you can eat on your days off, and the people I've met, and just the Australian culture itself has been really probably the best move I've ever made. And I think just working with the people I've worked with along the way, like working with Paul, then working with Andrew, and I think working with Andrew is just, Andrew's never stood still on anything that he's done. He's always moved forward, and he's like probably one of the top restaurateur in Australia, chef-wise, for what he's done. And I think just working with someone like that and just seeing just how his restaurants have evolved over the years is inspiring, and I think I've taken a lot from that. And yeah, I think Australia is probably the biggest one for me, coming here and met my partner here, and you know what I mean, have a really good life here now, and lots of good friends and a good network. And I think Australia is probably cooking some of the best food in the world right now, as a whole. You know what I mean? Which is really inspiring.
Well, we're moving towards summer. What can we expect to see on your menus as it heats up?
As it heats up, well, I suppose we always look forward to tomatoes when the tomatoes come in, and it's just depending on how the season's been, if they're good or bad. And I think we always try to do, since we've opened, we used to do a really nice anchovy dressing at Cumulus on the tuna with the crushed peas. And I kind of took that dressing and made it a little bit different. We blended it so it's more emulsified, and we dress our tomatoes with the anchovy dressing. And just, it doesn't need much. If you get really good tomatoes, a little bit of anchovy dressing, lots of black pepper, a little bit of olive oil, and maybe some fresh ricotta and a bit of basil. And that, like, people go off on that dish. And we just look forward to having tomatoes every year so we can do a variation of that dish. So that's one of the big things we look forward to. I really want to try and hopefully get to use asparagus before the season ends, because we've missed out on asparagus this year, which has been a big bummer, because I really love using asparagus. We do asparagus. I might do the asparagus with some marinated buffalo mozzarella, some smoked salmon roe. There's a lemon dressing that's really simple. Summer, lots of zucchinis coming in. We'll probably do zucchini salad. Some beautiful blueberries. You get some beautiful blueberries from Mundura Blueberries. They come in from January to March. So we'll do dessert with blueberries. We'll get some beautiful corn from baby corn from John. Janella Farms. He has some beautiful corn. He does amazing big corn as well. And you can either just eat it raw, or just we'll do a side dish, sauté that. And yeah, there's lots of stuff. It's you know what I mean.
Well, I can't let you go without giving us a great tip. You mentioned when you're taking the skin off the pork about leaving the fat on the pork, and you also like to dry the pork before you cook it. Is there a secret move that you do for crackling?
Crackling, I just the way I usually do crackling is I get a pan. I put like maybe half a cup of oil in there, so it's like, so I kind of submerge the skin in the oil. Make sure your skin is dry. I like to salt the skin a little bit as well just before I cook it, half an hour, and brush the salt off. It helps it to crackle up. I don't really score the skin. And then if I'm doing a rack, I get the oil warm, don't get it too hot, put the pork in skin side on, make sure the skin is nice and dry. And then I just slowly cook the pork skin in the oil. And every so often just push down, check the pork skin to see if there's any patches that need to be crackled up. Put some pressure on the pork, just be careful because it does spit. And just cook it slowly on the skin until it's nicely, get a nice crackle on it. And then I just finish the pork in maybe an oven that's on 150, and I take it to internal maybe 50, 55 with a thermometer. So you've already got the crispy crackling, and then you're just cooking the pork in the oven so it's nice and low, and the skin should stay nice and crispy as well.
Well, that's amazing. JP, we've loved having you on the Crackling. Please keep in touch.
Thank you for having me, and thanks for having your podcast. It's something to listen to.
Awesome, mate. Take care. This is The Crackling, a Deep in the Weeds production in partnership with PorkStar. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we catch up with some of Australia's best chefs and pork producers to discover what makes Australian pork so special.